Morning, it's now 8:37. Now, the Transport Secretary Mark Harper took the train to Manchester yesterday to meet 5 northern mayors to discuss the problem with rail services in the north of England, but only 4 showed up. Jamie Driscoll, the Labour mayor for the North Tyne, said the trains were too bad to make it, and so we had to zoom into the meeting. The irony is obvious. Let's speak to Jamie Driscoll now, who's on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Asma.
Did you kind of expect that there would be a problem with the trains? Because, they've not been great.
There always is. I mean, there's another 38 cancelled today. There was 61 cancelled yesterday. And these are the ones that are cancelled the night before. Tracy Brabin, my colleague, the mayor of West Yorkshire, one of her connecting trains ever was cancelled. It's fairly normal, sadly, and that is the fundamental issue here, that even when there is no industrial dispute, the trains are so poor, they have a shortage of drivers, sickness levels are high. So rather than risk being stuck on a platform and missing the meeting entirely, I scheduled to Zoom in. And I was in the meeting and had a detailed conversation with Mark Harper about these issues.
You mentioned Tracy Brabin. I saw that she tweeted yesterday her experience trying to get back, I think, from the meeting. We can just hear what she said.
So I've just been meeting the Secretary of State for Transport with the other northern mayors, and I'm trying to get back across the Pennines to West Yorkshire. And here in Manchester, Piccadilly, we have absolutely crammed platforms. The train has just split in half, and there is no way all of these people are going to get on this train. People are upset, they're angry.
So you get the idea, really, of the problem there. And I mean, I see many people. I don't think anyone's going to say that it's not a problem. What was discussed in the meeting? Has any progress been made?
Well, the progress is the key thing there, Asma, isn't it? I mean, there's been a change in tone, to be fair to Mark Harper. He did turn up and he did talk to us. But what we're going to need to see is action. And there's the short and the medium and the long term. In the short term, he needs to let the train operating companies negotiate with the trade unions. But we also need, it's not the industrial disputes didn't cause the rail system failure. It's the failing rail system that's caused the industrial disputes. There are no disputes in Scotland, Wales, Merseyrail, which has devolved, the Tyne Metro system, which has devolved. There's no rail disputes there. They've all been sorted. So the Westminster government is the common factor in where there are disputes, because they control the contracts that the train operating companies run. They're not like a standard business where they're subject to market forces. It is direct government contracts.
So what did Mark Harper have to say about that specific point?
Well, he was asking... essentially, could we set a different tone? He said he'd had a good discussion with the unions, but there was no specific progress. So we need to, the jury's out on that. But what we need is more drivers. So if you look at TransPennine Express, for example, who cancel routinely about 20 to 30% of their trains, they have recruited 50 drivers this year, but 60 have left and retired, and they came into the year with a shortage of drivers. So I proposed a rail academy for the north. There's lots of different training institutes around. In our part of the world, we have the Nexus Training Centre in South Shields, and said, well, look, the capacity's there in the buildings. Let's fund more people. And what we really need is to end this almost the competition between the rail companies for who is training their own drivers, and just have a bigger pool of skilled drivers. And that requires a little bit of money, not a huge amount of money for the government. Mark Harper said he would take that away. The training institutes are there. So there are more people available. In the medium term, we absolutely need to be getting more money into the railway system. So this is an issue of patronage. The government argue that because fewer people are using the railways, we should be spending less on them compared to COVID. But whereas numbers have bounced back to about 71% of pre-COVID levels in London, they're at 95% in Newcastle. We have fewer options because there's been less invested in public transport over the past few decades. And if we didn't have rail crisis, then we would be over 100% of pre-COVID levels of patronage. So the money is there. Passengers are paying for these things and not getting the service.
Well,
so he said he'd take that away.
Yeah.
And so these are the things he's got to deliver on if he wants to solve. I mean, it's a very serious problem.
No, it absolutely is. You know what I'm actually very interested in, because I follow a lot of people on social media who try to use these particular trains all the time, and I kind of think, my goodness, I'm so glad I don't have to do that, because it would be, well, I don't know what the word is. It's just wearying, really. You know, knowing that you don't have a proper train service. What's the impact, do you think, on people in these local areas? I don't just mean economically, but psychologically, really, because it must be quite difficult.
It is huge. I mean, you get the situation where the mayor of the North of Tyne decides it's not worth risking going on the train to meet the Secretary of State to talk about the trains. And that's a pretty good example. But I hear all sorts of stories. A young man who got a job in a different part of my region, going from Gateshead to Hartlepool, and the trains were so unreliable, he was regularly late, and his family had to have a whip round to get him a car that he can't afford. I'm hearing people arriving late for work and getting their pay dogs. I'm hearing of small businesses unable to open because staff haven't come in. And this is routine. There's kids standing on cold, dark platforms because the trains are cancelled when they come home from school. Northern trains, so the line from Carlisle to Newcastle, I mean, it's like, even when it's working, it has an average speed of 35 miles an hour. I mean, this is Victorian infrastructure. It really is. But along there, there's a bus replacement service, and they can't get enough drivers for the buses. And when the bus does turn up, it's not wheelchair accessible. I mean, this is not it's sliding into the sort of transport system that you hear of in developing countries.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you for that. That's Jamie Driscoll, the Labour mayor for the North of Tyne, who chose to zoom into the meeting rather than go to Manchester because he lost faith really in getting there. And for people saying, you know, why the cancelled trains, most of it seems to come down to not enough drivers.